Hello and welcome to this episode of Health in You. I am Sumi Sukanya Datta, and today we will talk about the connection between gut health and immunity and overall health and well being. To discuss this, we have with us gastroenterologists Dr. Rajiv Jaydevan and Dr. Nishant Nagpal. Dr. Jaydevan is with Sunrise Hospital in Kochi in Kerala and is also a medical researcher. Dr. Nagpal is with Fortis Hospital in Noida. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaydevan and Dr. Nagpal, for joining us today in this conversation. We will begin by asking you, Dr. Jaydevan, what exactly do you mean when we say gut health and why suddenly has it become a buzzword of sorts? Yes.
Yes. When we talk about the gut, we are talking about the mouth, the food pipe, the stomach, and the intestines. Now, traditionally, the gut is believed to be involved with uh, consuming food, digesting food, and absorbing what the food contains. That's what most people believe. Now, the gut does not just do that. There are many other functions of the gut that have been uncovered only in the past several years. One of them is the gut is an important immune organ. Now, when we hear the
Correct.
word immunity, we think of vaccines and we think of blood, white blood cells, bone marrow, macrophages, etc. But the gut is the body's largest immune organ for good reason because we are exposed every day to many things that we consume in the water and in the food we eat. And many of the things we consume um, could contain harmful bacteria, they could contain harmful viruses or toxins that are produced by these bacteria. They could also contain environmental pollutants and so on. So the gut's role is also in keeping these bad germs at bay, stopping them from invading our system, keeping them at arm's length, if you will, recognizing them, and also destroying them as the case might be. Now, we might think that the gut is doing it using the traditional cells in the body. For example, we've all heard of white blood cells, the T cells. Many people have heard of the innate immune system, which is basically the intrinsic built-in immune system, which is non-specific.
Right.
But there is a very large group of organisms that live in our body called the gut microbiome. Basically, it's a term for uh, billions of bacteria that live in our gut. Now, these are not disease causing bacteria, these are bacteria that are friendly, they do not cause any distress. They've been living with us for a very, very long time. And each individual, there are three of us in this meeting, each one of us has a different set of bacteria. But if you look at the total count of the bacteria, I need to say this, we have more bacteria than we have cells in our human body. The total number of bacteria is estimated to be 1 followed by 14 zeros. Now, 1 million has 6 zeros, 1 crore has 7. So this is 1 followed by 14 zeros number of bacteria. These are regular bacteria. These are not disease-causing bacteria that live with us.
Yeah, so we are a sum total of not only human cells but also bacterial cells to a great
True.
extent. Yeah.
We can call ourselves, we are a walking zoo. We are not just human cells. Along with us, we are carrying a whole ecosystem of these organisms.
Yeah. Dr. Nagpal, would you like to talk a little about, how our understanding of, gut health and immunity evolved over the last year or so? So, what work is happening in terms of, finding out and understanding more about gut health and immunity?
Ma'am, as sir said, so I would like to say that gut health, which we are talking about right now, is not only the gut. What all does it functioning right now? So we take that we are eating food. These bacteria are taking care of the food what we eat digest. There is a characteristic thought process, as sir will also agree. Like there is a person who's a sumo, like he's 120, 130 kgs. We think that he must be eating the same quantity of food as, or he must be eating more as compared to a thinner individual like you or sir or anyone. So now, but if you look at the diet quantity of those people and take a diet history, what you will find is that guy is actually eating less than you, but he's deriving his energy. So what we understand right now about food, things and all, it's not very sacrosanct. Each thing is bound to evolve more and more. And it's not only starting at the bacteria, it's about what kind of genomics is transgenomics which is happening, what kind of metabolic products they are producing. So proteonomics, metabolomics. So right now we are going not only the presence of bacteria which we can culture, how they are interacting, what kind of proteins they are producing, what kind of genetic modifications they are doing. That is what is defining each and every disease. There are
Yeah.
certain diseases on which they have characteristically linked these dysbiosis. That is what is called dysbiosis, basically, that your bacteria, there is a kind of bacteria in it. Now, once this bacterial system is altered, that's called dysbiosis. So if this dysbiosis is there, it has been found to be very specific in people with irritable bowel syndrome, in people with inflammatory bowel disease, especially gut related disorders, in celiac diseases, in allergic disorders, which we food allergies, which we talk about. So there are certain things in which we have recently till now directly found a link with these diseases. But there are so many more and many, almost all diseases where the role of these will come. So that is why, as sir is research, so sir will agree, there is talk about going on. Ki they have even talked about that anybody who's getting admitted to the hospital, you can take from mouth gut by microbiota, and based upon that, you can tell that this patient will improve or this will not improve, depending upon type of microbiota they are having in their mouth. And these things, you can tell that this patient is going to have a stormy course or this patient is going to have a good course. So microbiota interaction, type of microbiota, they can be helpful, they can be dangerous to you. So the work which is going on right now is trying to decode it, how much and whatever in which we can make out direct correlations. There are some direct correlations, there are some indirect correlations. Till now, I personally feel ki we talk about things in genes, ki okay, this is the gene which we have found, and we correlate a disease with that gene. The more and more our understanding of this transgenomics, transmetabolomics, or proteonomics will happen, what will happen is we will be able to come to know about more and more different interactions, the complex interactions which goes on in our body to lead to causation of a disease. And I firmly believe that almost all diseases in the body whichever we encounter, microbiota will have a role to play.
Yeah.
So this
So
is regarding
at the moment, our
physiology.
understanding of link between what is there, the bacteria that we carry with us, and the impact that they have in the diseases that we have is very limited. But going ahead, that is the area of investigation and examination on what exactly can we decipher if we decipher the kind of bacteria that we carry, right? If I have
Yeah.
understood it. Yeah. Dr. Jayadevan, would you like to speak a little about the kind of scientific work that is happening, in top universities abroad to sort of understand this? Yeah, and also, if you could give us some example of some diseases that we have already started establishing a link with when it comes to, gut microbiome.
Sure. Just so that our viewers will understand the connection
Right.
between a human being and bacteria, let's imagine a baby
Right.
being born. As you know, the
Hmm.
baby is coming from the safest place on the planet, which is a mother's womb, which is sterile, which means it's clean. There is no bacteria, there are no germs there. It's protected. But at the moment it steps out into the world, the baby gets feeded. The baby gets seeded with bacteria. Now, these are not necessarily bad bacteria. The baby is typically breastfed for the first 6 months or so. So the breast milk contains bacteria as well as antibodies that a mother generates. Remember, the baby does not have a well developed immune system. So much of the baby's immunity comes from these bacteria and also from the antibodies that the mother gives the baby. But after 6 months onwards, the baby gets to eat other kinds of foods, a little bit of fiber and other things. And from the age of 2 or 3, most children eat pretty much a smaller portion of what the adults eat. So the bacteriome, if you will, or the microbiome, which is basically the zoo that I was talking about, becomes a little stable beyond the age of 2 or 3. even though at that age it tends to be less resilient, which means that if you take a course of antibiotics, it get disrupted, it may not come back. Whereas in an adult, it's more resilient. In other words, you could take a course of antibiotics, it'll grow right back in a few weeks' time. So this microbiome gets stabilized over the years, and each one of us, as I mentioned, has a different microbiome.
Right.
As the doctor said, there are diseases that occur because of disruption in these bacteria. Some of them, one of them that comes to mind is during my gastroenterology fellowship program in New York, where we did one of the earliest randomized trials on a probiotic. Back then, probiotics were just coming into the market. For our viewers, there's a condition called Clostridium difficile colitis, which is
Right.
basically a dangerous form of diarrhea that can happen in a few people who receive antibiotics. And typically it happens in hospitals because people are on heavy duty antibiotics. Now, our hypothesis was that if we give them good bacteria that can
Mm-hmm.
protect them from the ravaging effect of these antibiotics, maybe we can stop the colitis from happening. So we gave,
Right.
obviously through protocol, we gave a group of people placebo, and the other group was given lactobacillus. And even though we did not succeed in demonstrating a cure, demonstrating control, we had trend in the right direction, basically, which meant that the people who got the probiotic had fewer numbers of this colitis, which basically tells us in plain English that these good bacteria have protective properties, and that was subsequently shown in multiple studies that probiotics, which is basically good bacteria that can be supplemented, have a role in disease protection. Now, we've come a long way since then. Now we know that even conditions like cardiovascular disease, heart disease, diabetes can be linked with bacteria. I'm not saying bacteria are the cause of heart disease, but they affect our metabolism, which basically means the food we eat, the bacteria have a role to play in how much we digest and how much we absorb. So no two people will handle the same meal in the same way. And you talked about research in developed nations. Yes, if you look up this thing called twin studies, I suggest for interested viewers to look up what's called twin studies. There are several doctors, including Tim Spector, who has made a name for themselves doing twin studies. And what's the advantage of twin studies? Twofold. One, if you get identical twins, you get two genetically identical people, and you can study their gut bacteria for a long time and see what happens. So
Right.
Dr. Spector found that people who are genetically identical, they tend to have the same kind of bacteria, with the caveat that if one of these twins is exposed to a completely different diet and environment, yes, these bacteria could change. Now, these are extremely important pieces of knowledge that fill knowledge gaps. Now, more recently, you might have heard of what's called FMT, or which is basically you insert bacteria, gut bacteria, into the human gut with an aim to prevent or cure diseases which range from inflammatory bowel disease, we call it colitis, or even liver disease, serious kinds of liver disease, which is, for example, you can look up hepatic encephalopathy, which is a dangerous complication of end stage liver cirrhosis. Yes, when you transplant bacteria from a healthy individual to the patients are showing signs of improvement. Now, this is not like a single cure or anything we're talking about. These are all pointers that tell us that bacteria have a role to play in health and disease.
Yeah. So you mentioned about probiotics. I would like both of you to answer this if you could. We have known for a long time, for instance, when we have, for instance, upset tummy, folks at home often tell us to have, a bit of curd, yogurt. Now we have probiotics, which is given to kids as well as adults in case of, problems with. Are there some tips and advices that we can probably, do we know enough yet to sort of influence our microbiome? And are there some, some things that we can do, some certain foods that we can have that in order to improve our gut health, the composition of microbiome, basically? Yes. Dr. Nagpal, would you like to start for this?
Yeah. Like in this, what we say is like if you talk about good food bacteria, now correlations with that you can talk about with obese people or a non-obese person and obese. Let's take a common example. So
Mhm.
how, and you can perfectly say that they are important. Like it has been found in normal persons, if they look at microbiota per se, the sampling of microbiota, it was found that there were more of bacteroids, more of proteobacteria. There is more of diversity, that there are many bacteria in these people when we talk about, as compared to like single kind of bacteria. And this bacteria which group is there, that's a stable group of bacteria which is there. So what
Right.
happens is, so these kind of bacteria, those who are present in curd, in our food items, in plant-based food items, these are the ones which are present in, they are bacteroids, they are proteobacteria. So they are helpful, they are in normal people. However, it has been found for those who are obese, as I was saying, less diet also, and yet they are obese. If their microbiota sampling was done, it was found that they have more of firmicutes, they have more of gram negative bacteria. And as sir said, that we have multiple species of bacteria inside, that diversity of that species is decreased in obese people, as well as the stability is decreased. So microbiota changes is definitely happening. As far as foods are concerned, fermented foods are the one which are considered to be good, and they are the one which provide you with good probiotics. So probiotics are good bacteria which are helpful for our body. They are
Right.
normally resistant to the antibiotics. They can make place inside our body, and they are available. We have certain medicines, a lot of medicines available which can give probiotics. Is there any particular standard, or is there anything which has happened? No. Different bacteria and different strains which have been studied, and each strain has been found and validated in particular studies, and based upon those, there are commercially available preparations. As far as general preparations are concerned, a common name which is available everywhere is Yakult. Like it is available everywhere. It's a mixture of particular things, probiotics, which is available and people can use it. But important point to remember, the half life or shelf life of that Yakult is only 4 days or 3 days. So they have to, from the day of manufacturing, they have to be consumed within 7 days. So once this manufacturing is happening in the country, they have to be brought to the market within a day or two. Then they have to be available to you, and you should consume it immediately. These Yakult people, when you bring it, you bring an entire crate with you and you keep on storing it for a month. That part is not gonna help. The basic things which were earlier in Indian diets, sir will tell you more about South Indian diets. In North Indian diets, if I can talk about, there used to be always a lot of curd in the diet, lot of buttermilk in the diet. So these in Gujaratis, if you look at, there's a lot of dhokla, there is fermented foods. The concept of fermentation is to get induce more amount of probiotics in the diet. Then eating salads along with it is prebiotics. Prebiotics are basically non-digestible fibers which are there, which a person consumes, and they help in growth of those bacteria. You can't digest them, but they are food for those bacteria, and they help in growth of these bacteria and this thing. So right now you have multiple amount of preparations available which are there in the market, which contains prebiotic, probiotic, and these things together, a lot of combinations. So the
So,
most
apart
common.
from vegetables and fruits that we keep saying that we should consume more and more, we should also think on the lines of including probiotics and prebiotics, like you said, in our diet, in our regular
Hmm,
diet. Yeah. Dr.
yeah.
Jaydevan, would you like to add something to it?
Yes, I'm glad Dr. Nagpal mentioned obesity. Let me present an experiment to you first to put things in
Mhm.
perspective. This again came from a mice experiment that occurred.
Right.
They looked at mice that were germ-free, which basically mice, like just like the newborn baby, they had no bacteria loaded in them, like a computer that is completely new and you have to load the apps. So these mice, they divided into two sets, identical mice. They divided into two sets. One set of mice, they gave bacteria that belonged to an obese individual's gut, human being's gut. They took the
Right.
bacteria from an obese person's gut and gave one set of mice these bacteria. And the
Right.
other set, they took the bacteria from a lean person's gut, which means a thin person's gut. And to make it even more interesting, these two individuals were genetically identical, which means they were twins. And these two sets of mice were fed the same kind of diet. Can you guess what happened? The mice who got the obese person's bacteria became obese with the same diet, and
Mm-hmm.
the mice who got the lean person's bacteria stayed
Stay
lean
tuned.
in spite of being on the same food. This tells us that
Yeah.
bacteria have a substantial role to play in how much food we absorb. And that is the obesity study that we mentioned about. There are so many more studies along those lines. I'll recommend our readers to look up these fascinating
E-
projects. The
Yeah.
second point is
Even in
about, yeah, Dr. Nagpal.
nothing, sir. Nothing. Just was running ulcerative colitis. Even severe ulcerative colitis not responding. Like you can do FMT. That still helps, even though you think that is so bad.
Yes. So, a second point is about probiotics. I know that people would want to take a pill to improve their health, but I'll add a word of caution here. What works for one person need not work for another. And
Right.
second, excess of anything is not good for you. So, just because someone said probiotic is good for you on social media, don't go popping all these pills. We don't know what excessive dosing of these things will do. But as Dr. Nagpal said, anything that's fermented, you can safely consume it in reasonable amounts, that it is healthy. And the common things that are available in our country are typically yogurt or buttermilk. These are the two kinds of fermented foods that are available. And then there are regional variations of other fermented foods as well. And the other thing is, if our viewers want to know what kind of a diet will promote a more diverse, a more let's say a rich and stable bacterial population in our gut, I'll say this. One, eat plenty of fiber, because fiber, as we heard, is a prebiotic, which basically food for the bacteria. Remember, the bacteria also need food, right? So they eat the fiber and they produce interesting substances from it. For instance, short chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, which have a major role in the gut integrity. How strong our gut is for the most part decided by how much short chain fatty acids are produced by the bacteria, not by the human body. The
Okay.
bacteria also produce vitamins like folic acid that we absorb in our body. The second thing they could consume is wholesome food, which is basically food that's rich in fiber. For instance, instead of taking, let's say, highly refined wheat flour, go with whole grain flour, whole grain wheat, or whole grain rice. And they contain fiber, which our bacteria love to chomp on, and they're happy, and they grow into a diverse ecosystem. Compared to an individual who only thrives on biscuits and processed food, and as much as we love all these products, we must take them in moderation or to the least extent possible. The third is, be very cautious about antibiotics. In India, we've talked about this dozens of times. There's a tendency to overuse antibiotics, self medicate on antibiotics. 9 out of 10 fevers are viral, and they settle down with no treatment at all, as long as they're seen by a qualified person. There is no need to take an antibiotic for a viral fever or what seems like a viral fever. The doctor thinks it's a bacterial infection. Yes, the doctor will give you an antibiotic, but there's no need for the individual to talk with an office colleague and say, I took this antibiotic, you take that antibiotic. I see that all the time. And some people walk up to the counter of a drugstore or a pharmacy and say, Bukhar hai, and then the person dispenses an antibiotic. All this must be stopped, because every time we take an antibiotic, we are putting a bomb, literally putting a bomb in our gut, destroying all the good bacteria that have been built up
That's a
over
very nice
decades.
way of putting it. Putting a bomb against,
Yes.
yeah, bacteria.
So these are some of the tips I can give our viewers for what's called a healthy diet to promote a good microbiome. Yogurt is good, buttermilk is good, whole grain is good. Salads, as long as they're clean. You got to be remember, salads when eaten raw. You heard about the food poisoning, E. coli outbreak with kidney failure occurring in the U.S. From one of the fast food chains. We've heard about that. Now remember, raw salads can contain E. coli, and you must be careful. Make sure that they're properly washed. I would stick with fruit like banana, which is cheap, easily available and clean. If you peel a banana, there are no bacteria in it, at least
Right.
that are considered harmful, because people haven't touched the inside of the banana, right? So it's a very, very good. Guavas are excellent sources of fiber, which are cheap. You can grow them in our backyard, and they're very, very nutritious. So there are many other fiber-rich foods that are available. They don't necessarily have to be expensive. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, processed food and our bacteria, they don't like each other.
Yeah. Very important messages there. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagpal and Dr. Jaydevan, for taking time out for this. Really appreciate both of you joining us for this
Okay.
conversation. Thank you so much.